Over the past couple of months, the discussions at the G20 working group tend to look at the positivity and what can be achieved in terms of agricultural growth and food security, particularly on the African continent. Now, 4 key policies are on the table at these discussions. The first of those is bringing in young people and women into agri-systems, as well as the second being trying to foster policies and investment that can ensure that there's food security and nutrition security. Then there's bringing in innovation and technology and trying to adapt to the changing times. The fourth and the last of the priorities is building climate resilience. And that last one has taken a center stage at some of these conversations, particularly because Africa and Asia are vulnerable to natural disasters, and trying to build up systems that make sure that we're able to respond to the climate and the natural disasters so that we're able to keep up with production. The other one speaks to trade, and there's a lot of conversations, of course, around how we can bring in the leading economies to ensure that they're able to lead the conversations around trade, trying to make sure that we're breaking down barriers that prevent trade, as well as the tariffs that make it harder to take part in trade, because it's all good and well to produce food domestically that we're able to consume, but there's a demand for our products outside of the South African borders. Our citrus, our maize, our wine, our nuts, all out to the US. Yes, even though we are still facing higher tariffs at the moment, there is still a demand there as well, and there are still opportunities. So it's the EU, it's the US, as well as the Asian markets. The question then becomes, how do we turn these policies into action?
If they can be able to implement, because you must check every time they will be talking, they will be implementing, but in terms of delivering what they are talking about, it becomes a challenge. But if they can try at least every year, maybe 80% of what they are discussing at the G20 to be able to come in place, and then we see that this is going to work or not. Because in terms of agriculture, agriculture is about practice. Theory is something that you go to school and learn, but when you come to doing it practically, it becomes a different story. So if they can be able to implement what they are discussing, then we will be able to say, yes, it's working, or we need to change here, or whatever.
One of the key conversations being driven through G20 and via the G20 different work streams and agriculture work stream is really around food security. But it's more about how we optimize food systems to enable food security. And what does that really mean? It means, if you look at globally, there's a huge problem of food waste globally. But yet we have an issue of hunger as well. At a global level, you're looking at about 20.8% of the globe, the world, that is moderately to chronically hungry. And similarly in Gauteng, you have about 28%, give or take, of the population of Gauteng that suffers from hunger, as in they are not guaranteed a meal a day. But on the other hand, you're wasting 10 million tons of food a day in the country. So there is a disconnect between how the systems and the economy of food works as far as actually solving the issue of food security. South Africa, again, is a net exporter of food. We are exporting and producing enough to feed other countries, but we're not able to feed ourselves adequately because of what? The price of food, affordability, that has to do with import-export, conditions and tariffs and such. But it also has to do with distribution models and how we make sure that we get food and make food available to the people that need it the most. So it's a big conversation, and we have been at a Gauteng level championing the cause of reducing, and actually we want to advance legislation should be put in place to bar and prohibit food waste. Food waste is actually, it should be a crime as far as I'm concerned, because, and I'm talking about not rotten food, I'm talking about food that is perfectly healthy to eat, that just gets chucked in landfills because it's not being bought. So these are things that we are certainly grappling with. Food insecurity is not something that many of us have to deal with, but 1 in 4 residents of Gauteng are dealing with it. And so we have to take a concerted approach towards that. And so G20's various forums, such as the Food Security Task Force, will be seized with looking at some of those matters around the global pricing of food, food security matters, food sovereignty. That speaks to IP regulations and how we ensure that people can actually grow food that is appropriate for their conditions where they live. So there's a number of such conversations, and it's been very interesting, and I do think it needs a global approach. So it's good to see that being top of the agenda for G20.
For me, I mean, when I look at what G20 is going to be covering in terms of agriculture, they're talking about food security, sustainability of food, healthy food, people accessing that food, right? And now you're talking to all these other people who are actually dumping in here, right? So what are the conversations that they're going to be having? Is this G20 accessible to your ordinary person on the street? Do they know what is going on except seeing it that, oh yeah, there is G20? I would really appreciate if it's not just a talk shop, but it trickles down to your everyday person on the street. Listen to them and speak to those countries to say, this is what is happening in South Africa. How can we collaborate? How can we have mutually beneficial trade relations, right? And for me, that is the biggest thing, right? So the reality is, after G20, can we now see those trade relations, understand them, know how we can participate in them, and government speaking to industry and bring it to your everyday person.
As we build up to the G20 Leaders Summit in November, we will, of course, continue to bring you those conversations, piecing together all of these moving parts, particularly when it comes to breaking down the trade barriers so that there's food security, not just in South Africa, in Africa, and, of course, then the rest of the globe. From the Eyewitness News G20 desk, my name is Nogukhanya Mdambo.